The point of life is to grow good food together, celebrate its harvest by eating it and dancing. And I was like, yeah, I can get down for that lifestyle. The wonderful thing about growing on the boat was that it like connected you not just to nature, but also like other people.
If a slug is gonna go beyond water to get these, I was like, you can have them.
While I was going through the process of learning gardening, I was really looking for a philosophy as well that I could live by.
Hello and welcome to Connect to Nature. I'm Amy Chapman. I'm a gardener and author, and I love to spend time in nature, noticing the little things.
And I'm Katrina Ridley. I'm a broadcaster, presenter, nature enthusiast, and I do a lot of outdoor hobbies very averagely, which I'm sure I'll tell you all about at some point. But Amy, how did you connect to nature this week?
So this week I was moving my boat. I live on a boat, for anyone who doesn't know. I will try not to go on and on about this, although it's quite difficult not to.
That's literally part of living on a boat.
Yeah, it's my whole personality now.
Mm-hmm.
But I was doing a big move this week, and it was a couple of hours. I was just slowly cruising down the canals and I saw a muntjac just like in the bushes under some trees. And I was so distracted just staring at it that I nearly crashed my boat. The boat went horizontal across the canal and there were two boats behind me. It was quite embarrassing, but easily distracted.
Did you try and shout it behind? Sorry, it was a muntjac.
Well, luckily, one of the boats behind me was my friend and we have walkie-talkies. So I just told them.
Of course. Perfect.
Yeah, I was like, look in the bushes, quick. And they were really happy that I told them. So yeah, great experience. But how have you connected to nature this week?
Well, this was actually with my friend who I also have a walkie-talkie with. That's just what we do. But I went to India basically to go and see where my family are from. And it was this whole like mind-blowing experience. But what was equally mind-blowing was experiencing a baby banana for the first time. And I just feel like I have never tasted a proper banana until now. And then when I got back to London this week, I found an Indian shop and they had two baby bananas at the till. And they were like the last one. I felt like I bought the last bananas in London. And yeah, it was just so nice. I got one for my friend and for me. And I felt like I was like back in India in a forest.
That's so nice. I absolutely love baby bananas as well. Did the ones in London taste as good?
They were a bit crunchy, but you know, what can you do?
Yeah. Well, today we are going to be talking to Poppy Okotcha, who I'm really excited to chat to. She's someone who I've been following for a really long time, actually. She's a gardener, regenerative grower. I love what she's about. So
yeah, I followed her from ages ago. I remember before I moved onto a boat, and now I've moved off a boat. But seeing all she grew on there, and then her transition from boat to like Devon life, so it will be very interesting.
Yeah, very exciting. We've got her remotely today, so let's have a little chat with Poppy.
Hello, my name's Poppy Okotcha. I'm a home grower, a community gardener, an author and a mama, and I share what I do here on social media. So my relationship with nature is really one of teacher. The subtitle of my book is How Gardens Grow Us, which sums it up for me really.
Hi Poppy, it's so lovely to have you here. I've been wanting to speak to you for such a long time, as you've been such an inspiration to me as a gardener. So yeah, I'm very excited to get into it.
And where are you today?
Oh, that's really kind. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to speak with you guys too. I am in Devon, in South Devon, in the countryside.
We've made it as naturey here as possible. We are in London though.
Well, yeah, I'm in a very stark room right now. I've got some dried flowers behind me.
Oh, lovely.
Well, we always start with some like quick fire questions. So I'm going to give you some options of things and we just want your first instinctive response. Are you ready?
Okay, fun. Yes, for sure.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Soil or sand?
Soil.
Worms or caterpillars?
Oh, worms. I was going to say caterpillars and I was like, no, the instinct is worms.
Herbal tea or fresh fruit?
Fresh fruit.
Farm shop or garden centre cafe?
Oh, farm shop.
Greenhouse or house music?
Oh, can I have the house music in my greenhouse?
You can have whatever you want. Spades for hands or forks for feet?
Spades for hands.
Amazing. Personality.
Actually useful.
Very useful. Personality-wise, are you more like an apple or a tomato?
Tomato, for sure.
And would you rather always smell like compost or always smell like wild garlic?
Compost. It actually smells nice.
I'm surprised by that. I'd go wild garlic all day, every day.
I love the smell of wild garlic, but maybe not for a person all of the time.
Yeah. I don't want to be like, oh, that's garlicky. Like, it can be quite overpowering. I like the kind of like earthy gentleness of compost.
I love the smell of compost.
Are you into house music then?
Yes. Well, not. I'm more into jungle and drum and bass, to be perfectly honest. But I like a bit of music in the greenhouse, so yeah.
This is the new intersection. We want to see music in greenhouses. This is it.
I have a disco ball, so I feel like the music, it's necessary.
Yeah, bring the music in as well. Get some massive speakers blasting out some music.
Yeah.
The glass will be vibrating.
Yeah, what was it? Classical music for plants is gone. Now it's just like house jungle. Here we go.
I'm sure that would make them grow faster.
I think they'd love it.
So Poppy, for someone who hasn't heard about you or your work, can you give us a little overview?
Yeah, okay. So yes, my name is Poppy Okotcha. I am a home grower. I previously also ran a community market garden before also becoming a mama. I'm a writer and a speaker, and that's on organic, natural, ecological gardening. And I share what I do on social media as well.
You're doing a lot. You're a busy gal.
Yeah, she likes to be busy. I like to be busy.
Was there a first moment that you remember connecting with nature or something that drew you into it growing up?
Well, this is kind of like the beginning of my book, really, because there's like, lots of moments through adulthood where I was like, oh, like I'm kind of reconnecting back. But the kind of very, very like foundational bit of it was definitely given to me by my mum, which I'm really lucky to say, because I think a lot of people find themselves coming to it in adult life and it's alien and you have to start from nothing. So I had a foundation, and that was, from my mum's love of gardening. I grew up in a townhouse in London with very modest new build garden, but it was like so important to me. It's pretty bare, but it had a buddleia bush and that was covered in butterflies, and that features heavily in my memories. And crawling around in the hedges in the park, and then there's my grandma's garden. She lived outside London. And to this day, that place is like one of the destinations I go to in my mind when I'm stressed. It's not like a magnificent, splendid garden, but it's cared for. And as I've kind of like grown my own horticultural understanding, that for me is a sign of beauty in a garden. It doesn't have to be like picture perfect, but if you can see signs of care, like sensible care, that is for me what makes me excited in a garden. So yeah, those are my sort of foundational sort of childhood moments in nature. And then as I got older and I moved out of the countryside when I was in my late teens, and I started working in fashion, I was finding myself like really at a loss, not thriving physically or mentally. And at that point I came back to nature as well, and that was when I was in my early 20s after a few years working as a model in the fashion industry. And I came into like wanting to understand about how to eat well. And from that, I came into gardening.
This episode of Connect to Nature is sponsored by Fairtrade. If you care about nature, climate change, and where your food comes from, here's something worth thinking about. The people growing many of the products we rely on every day, from coffee and chocolate to tea and bananas, are already facing some of the worst impacts of climate change. Extreme heat, flooding, and crop failures are making it harder for farming communities to earn a living, despite contributing the least to the climate crisis.
Yeah, Fairtrade's Do It Fair campaign is calling for a future that is fair on the planet, where businesses are held accountable for their environmental impact. And the people growing our food get the support they need to adapt and thrive.
You can help by choosing Fairtrade products and adding your voice to Fairtrade's petition calling for stronger laws to protect people and the planet. Find out more and sign the Fair on the Planet petition at fairtrade.org.uk. And together we can help build a future that's fair to people and fair to the planet.
Was the tipping point for you? Was there like a moment or a person where you're like, I need to share this journey?
Well, a bit more background. I was Steiner educated, and in school they kind of, show you how to do composting, and we spent like a whole year looking at a flower blooming and then turning to seed, and you had to draw it, when that was something I did as a kid as well. And so I had like a bit of a background of like, okay, this is how you make compost, a bit of a vague understanding of biodynamics. And so when I started wanting to understand more about like, okay, so you can have organic food, but how do you go beyond that, away from industrial ag and into something a bit more holistic? I had that background already from like very early years. It wasn't all too foreign. And then from there, from biodynamics, I went into permaculture, and at one point, my partner and I found ourselves travelling in India, and we visited an intentional community called Auroville. And there was a permaculture food forest run by a guy called Katrina, who was a British guy who'd moved over there years ago, and he'd totally like integrated into the community. You know, he was basically part of the soil. And he was growing this incredible food forest that was feeding people, but also providing work for local folks and people in the community. And that was my first kind of like contact with really effective horticultural projects, which are feeding people good food, providing access to nature and jobs. And that was for me the turning point. And his passion and huge depth of knowledge, I was like, I want to be like him when I'm older. So I came back to England. And another thing he said, he was like, the point of life is to grow good food together, celebrate its harvest by eating it and dancing. And I was like, yeah, that's I can get down for that lifestyle. So I came back to England and basically like tried to figure out how I could realign my life in that direction. I'm getting there slowly but surely.
Are you still in touch with Krishna?
No, I met him one time. I actually found a photo on my phone from back then when I think it was in like 2015 or 14. And there's like a really blurry, like old iPhone picture of him like with the soil in his hand. I should look him up and write him because he actually features in my book as well.
Yeah.
And you might not even know he's changed like the entire course of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
He would be so proud. Yeah. So you talk a lot about the cyclical nature of gardening, and I would love to hear more about that and whether it's changed the way you live your life or your perspective on things at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I did come into gardening, as I said, I was trying to find something. It originally came from wanting to heal my body, so looking at food and good food. And along with that, I was also trying to heal my mind in that I'd been in this industry that felt highly extractive and basically at odds with feeling well. And so while I was going through the process of learning gardening and practicing gardening, I was really looking for a philosophy as well that I could live by. And one of the things that came out of gardening was this like circular thing, you know, like plants grow, they give their fruit, they die and turn to compost, make soil, more plants, on and on and on. And that was just like in stark contrast to the linear extractive models or systems that I'd been exposed to in the fashion industry, and which I experienced personally have such a detrimental impact on health, not just over planet globally, but on individuals. And, you know, I was pretty high up the chain of, you know, who's getting badly impacted. You know, at the very bottom, there was like the garment workers and the farmers. And yet I was still suffering. So I was very much looking for a kind of remedy to that. And I felt that in the garden, one of the biggest lessons was this understanding of circularity. Without that circularity, you get an unhealthy garden environment. And it's the same for humans. If we don't have these periods of rest, of composting and digesting, we get sick. And it's so simple. We forget it.
Yeah, I love just your mindset with all of this is so instinctive and natural, but for some reason feels so radical in society. Like, why do you think that is?
Well, in a society that is literally built on systems of linear extraction, to step away from that is radical, because the system doesn't function if you don't do that.
Yeah.
Like it literally is radical. And I think that, you know, something that I also found in my process with gardening and particularly writing this book was when we start to see the world as these cycles of life and death, so much in our human day-to-day life becomes gentler. For example, like going really, you know, far down the line of what can be painful. When we lost my mother-in-law several years ago, very suddenly, the process of being with her in her death and, you know, laying her to rest, etc., was hugely softened by previous experience of contact of death in the garden and understanding how death works. I kind of came to the conclusion through the writing of my book that there is such thing as good death. There's such thing as death that kind of produces goodness and well-being and more nutrition for what's to come. And I think that's something that we find really uncomfortable in our modern society. We're so terrified of endings. We're so terrified of death in all its forms, not just physical death. And with that kind of allergy, it's very hard to live well and to live in a way that is truly sustainable, whether that's like physical sustainability when we look at like global development, or whether that's like personal sustainability, looking at your own mental health. Like there has to be the capacity to let go and for things to decompose and to be able to sit with the like grottiness of that.
That's such a nice way to think about it as well, of having like a good death. Like I read a book a long time ago, but I think it's in like Spanish culture and things like that. Like cemeteries are very central in towns, and it's like something, especially as British people, we don't talk about a lot. So it's quite nice to have that gardening analogy almost to like soften but teach.
Yeah, exactly. It's like when I've got a toddler now, and you want to give the gentle lessons outside of the big life lessons, if that, like to like prime things. Like we're about to go through weaning, so I'm telling lots of like little stories to like get ready for the big main event. And I feel like the garden does that. It like primes us for the big main event,
Yeah, I find that so comforting to like observe nature and just notice the cycles of it and how that is reflected in our own lives as well. And yeah, it definitely helps me a lot. Is there anything else that you take from the garden into your day-to-day life? And I think even in the modern worlds we live in, it can be so difficult to integrate those patterns of nature sometimes. But is there a way that you can do that even when things are really busy?
Yeah, I actually overheard a conversation recently when I was in the library, and the guy was like chatting to his friend quite loudly. Obviously, the libraries are quiet, so I was like, "Oh, have a listen." And he was saying about how he'd moved from London to Devon recently, and that he finds that even when he is in, a fairly green countryside setting, if he's disconnected from his body, he doesn't feel well. And he's sort of was explaining this idea that, it's all well and good to have theoretical nature connection, i.e. going for your nature walks, but if you're not like embodied, then you're going to be struggling. And I thought, oh yeah, that's so true, because actually a huge part of gardening isn't just the thing of like being out in a green space and getting to like have a mindful observation of a flower or whatever it might be. It's being embodied, like having a physical experience, whether that's turning the compost, whatever, getting sweaty, feeling the edges of what you're able to achieve physically. So I think that like actually, if we're unable to kind of slow down and access a green space that's like a beautiful one and that feels safe, I think just having an embodied experience in our own bodies, because we are nature, is really valuable, So that's just going back to stuff like yoga or working out, And then that means that in our busy modern lives, accessing nature, if we are nature, is as simple as accessing ourselves.
I could just listen to you talking in that way for so long. I was like, yeah, tell me more. Well, I suppose this is I feel like I've, been on this journey for the last few years of, connecting body, mind, the outside world. And I know you talk about spirituality in your book. I suppose, can you sort of explain your beliefs there? Like what does spirituality and nature mean to you? I know you've already touched on the embodiment side of it.
Yeah, I find it sometimes hard to talk about this because I feel like it shifts so much. In my book, I explore a lot of the worldview of my ancestors on my father's line, so from Nigeria with the Igbo tribe, and the I guess religion you could call it, is called Odinala, and it's an animist faith, and it's, as with all animist faiths, it's like the idea that everything is alive, the soil, the stones, the trees, and the earth itself is like a goddess mother. And to me, that's kind of the worldview that I prescribe to. And when I say living, I don't mean like alive, like anthropomorphized, like a human that I'm necessarily going to like chat to, but more just like a deep respect and sense that I belong to a network of life, and that I'm borrowing my body and it's going to decay back into the earth at some time. And that's somehow like really humbling, while also being mind-blowing, because like how crazy that we're all connected by this, breath of life, whatever it may be, whatever we want to call it. We're all vibrating. And that to me is kind of what I ultimately sit at the end of the day when all said and done. Like gardening for me is just meddling with life. And I think that's part of why it feels so good for us. We can, look at all the studies, and there's so many of them now supporting why access to gardens or gardening or being in nature is good for our brains and bodies. But for me, like if I'm going to go on my instinct, it's just nice to be dancing amongst other life as life myself, you know? It just feels good. It's like playful.
Yeah, definitely. Is there anything that you would say the land has taught you that books would never be able to teach you?
I think it's taught me how to process my emotions better. I think it's taught me how to connect with other people better. One of the things that I guess, took from permaculture, one of the most important bits, I think, is the community element. And, you know, before, when I was gardening in my own garden, that was all well and good. But the process of like being part of the community garden that I am part of now, and the one that I was running previously, it's been like really transformative. I think that I'm able to connect better with people now. And that's through being able to be out in a kind of space that keeps your mind gently busy, and you're able to talk to people and sort of connect with them in a very different way. It's quite like a special thing, I think, to garden alongside people that you have a mission with. Because in our like adult lives, we have like our colleagues and we have our friends and our family, but we don't always necessarily have like this other kind of person, which is someone you've got a mission with. You're maybe not friends as such, because you're not necessarily going to the pub together, but like you're deeply connected, and it's almost like a similar category as a therapist. And I think that probably people had a lot more of that in their lives historically when we had to work communally to survive, essentially. I think it's something that we're missing, and it's something that gardens have like shown me, which has been really valuable, definitely. Yeah. I think, you know, especially in the UK, there's such high levels of loneliness amongst not just the elderly, but the young people as well. I think it's like a really precious thing.
I was going to say, hearing you speak like that is so strange. Like in my body, I just feel so like fired up with like joy and passion, but just annoyance of like, it's so basic, you know, what you're saying is so ingrained in us and instinctive. And just like, how have we gotten to this point where you don't have that deep connection through all those things?
Yeah, I do feel like gardens and outdoor spaces are the perfect places to connect with other people. Like there is no ego in the garden. Everyone is on common ground, I guess. Yeah, it's always such a lovely environment. And I would love to hear more about your community garden setup, because I've seen you post about it before and it seems really cool.
It is really cool, and everyone there is so cool. The project was originally a CSA, so community supported agriculture. It's on a piece of land that's like a community project that had like women's groups and men's groups and that sort of thing on. And they've got a market garden there, and so they had a CSA, but it wasn't super successful. They didn't really have the human power to do it. And so they were looking for an alternative project to do with the land to make sure it was still useful and valuable for the community. And the idea came to have a CSA, but except for, rather than people paying for their veg box, people come and grow it themselves, and they give, rather than money, they give time and energy and effort, you know. And so that's how Grow Share was born. And I joined up in the first year, and then ended up taking a supportive, directional kind of role. And the idea of the group was that it was non-hierarchical, so everyone gets a sense of belonging to the land because everybody is equally invested in it and everyone gets to make a decision. Obviously, everyone has different levels of expertise and knowledge and different skills, so you step back where it's not necessarily like you don't necessarily have useful input, but ultimately everyone has a fair share in the space. And so people come once a week. Usually it's a Friday afternoon, and we grow produce. And then in the summer months, there's so much food that we don't only get our own veg boxes and don't have to go to the shops for our greenery, like our produce, but we also have surplus to donate to the distribution network that gives food to people who need it. So it's really great. And people basically get, you know, access to meaningful relationship with the land, which even in the countryside is hard to come by because so much of the land is just farmland. You can't go on it, or if you do, you're going to get sprayed. Not everyone has garden spaces. Not everyone has the time, energy, knowledge of how to manage their garden if they do have one. And so it basically breaks down all those barriers and creates an environment where we can be really productive, having a good time, and also foster this really wonderful sense of like, oh, we've got this like bit of land that we look after and it looks after us in turn, you know?
That is amazing you're making it so accessible, because like I guess I see people like you and Amy from afar and think like, oh God, could I ever do that? And do I ever have the knowledge? So it's nice you're just saying to people, you know, you're all important and you can all have a part in this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important to say that it's a free experience because it's funded. It's not for profit. And that means that the project has the kind of flexibility to be able to be a bit experimental. You know, we don't have to grow this to like send it to market and make money out of it. And that's a huge luxury. It means that the garden becomes like kind of a well-being space as much as anything else, you know?
It's so inspiring. And I feel like these sorts of projects should be everywhere. Like everyone should be involved in one. Imagine what the world would look like.
Absolutely. I will say it does take a lot of energy. Like, you know, when I had my little boy, I thought that I'd step away for like 3 months max, you know, give birth, come back. But that's not how it's gone. Yeah, that's not how it's gone. You know, we're like now 2 years later and I'm like, you know, tentatively part of the group and really so grateful for the support of all the other members. But I'm by no means back at like, you know, the levels that I was before. And I think that that's something that's also been really humbling and another reason that the community setup is so valuable, because there's no way I would have been able to harvest free homegrown produce, just me and my baby. But with the group of people, like we're getting fed and that's just precious, you know?
I suppose that's another example of, I guess maybe growing up, I thought that growing your own food and things like that were very much a privilege. I suppose by investing in that community mindset, it is making it more accessible. You know, I don't need to have all this time and money and space. You can do it together.
Yeah, and say you need to buy seed for the crop or a tool or irrigation system. If you're splitting the cost across like 30 people, or if you're able to do a crowdfund because it's a project that the community, you know, supports and is inspired by, then the cost factor is also dealt with to a degree.
I feel inspired to start these up everywhere. So you used to live on a boat, and I kind of selfishly just want to ask you for some tips for growing on a boat, but also for anyone who's listening who might have like a small space, it might be applicable to them as well.
Yeah, I lived on a boat in London for like nearly 6 years before we moved to the countryside. I definitely couldn't have hacked London for that long without the boat. And yeah, I'd say the best tip was probably just to grow in as big a container as you possibly can, because that means you've got more soil, can hold more moisture, more nutrients, etc. And it just makes your job a lot easier. Like I'd have all these like really cute dinky pots with, you know, small little things in, and if I didn't water them for like a day, they'd dry out. So water efficiency, have a big pot as you possibly can. Of course, mulch the surface if you can with like, even if it's a newspaper or leaves. And then a great thing about the boat is that if you have like a bad spot, like you're getting too much shade or something, you can just move.
Yeah, perfect.
Get full sun on your plants. And the final one was that don't underestimate a small space or growing in containers. I think it's actually the best way to start because it's contained in that you can control so much. Like you can control the quality of the compost you're growing in. You usually have a lot less problems with slugs and snails because you can like fully clear out the space, especially if it's like a patio or a boat roof. I had a rude awakening when I started growing in the ground and all the slimy folk started coming and annihilating my crops. So I think oftentimes people are like, oh, I've got a tiny space, I can only grow in pots. That's great. Start there. That's the perfect place to start.
Yeah, I'm so excited. And it's so accessible as well, just like growing in a few pots, and then you can start to slowly scale it up, add more pots and cram in as much as possible, which is my plan.
Yeah. I think that, to be honest, in the garden, like it's so easy to get overwhelmed. And I'm now of the opinion that if it's just you on your own, you're not in a community, then as small as possible is good.
Yeah.
I was so confused when I was on my boat. I was growing like lettuces and radishes on the roof. And I had some massive slug infestation on the boat roof. So I was kind of like, fair play. Do you know what I mean? If a slug is going to...
Were they coming out of like your logs? Maybe you had your logs stacked and they were like in the bark or
I have
something.
no idea. I just remember thinking if a slug is going to go beyond water to get these, I was like, you can have them. Yeah. I was like, that's actually fair enough. Yeah. I was like, you deserve this, actually.
I also think the wonderful thing about growing on the boat was that it like connected you not just to, you know, quote unquote nature, but also like other people, because, you know, everyone gets interested, and that was just really nice.
I've got a few plants on my roof, and just like cruising the boat down the canal a little bit, I always have people comment on it, and it seems to make them so happy to see.
Also, a very dirty boater practical question of, do you both use canal water to water your plants? How do you both feel about that, if it's things you're going to eat?
Yeah, I did. I just made sure to water into the root zone. Yeah. But like coming from permaculture, like there's no way, like it's impractical to have to use like your water tank water. Like no. I've got to wash, I've got to drink.
Barely even
but
wash.
Also from a permaculture exactly. From a permaculture perspective, wanting to use like a resource that's like more renewable. And of course the canal water is essentially rainwater. So
I ate some tomatoes, I seem all right. So you know.
Sure, it'll be fine.
Honestly, the stuff they spray on things on the farm, I feel like a little bit of like gammy water is probably not the worst.
I've not heard anyone use the word gammy in a long time, and I really enjoyed that.
I guess to finish off, what actionable thing would you recommend for anyone at home to do who wants to take a gentle step towards living a more nature-connected lifestyle?
I'd recommend growing something that you really, really love to eat, because I struggled a little bit getting myself back into the garden after having my son and really like meeting it with the amount of passion and energy I had previously. But this year I've just been like, okay, what do we just really enjoy? What are we going to just like have the best time harvesting in the summer? And it's berries. So we're going to be planting up a whole load of berries, blackcurrants and thornless blackberries. And that has gotten me so invested in the garden and the whole journey with it again. So I think that's what I'd say. Just like choose a really decadent crop and go with it. And just choose that one and get it really good, rather than overwhelming oneself with like a whole produce list.
It's so admirable. I mean, you have a son, you're still invested in all these communities, you're still growing. So like you are doing amazing things. And I think especially being able to sort of look up to a female role model and doing all those boxes and living so in sync with nature, it's really beautiful to see.
I will say though that like the way you say it, it sounds like I am, you know, like a boss lady. I'm not. The garden is supporting me and the community is supporting me, and I'll like, you know, I couldn't actually do motherhood the way I do without those things. It's really hard, and you know, that's one of the sort of lessons from the garden, that community and networks are what make health, not just things in isolation, you know.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for talking to us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely to chat.
Yeah, and then hopefully we get to meet in person at some point, or do a bit of community gardening together.
That would be wonderful. Well, maybe you guys will come this way and join for one of the community feast days.
I would absolutely love to do that.
I'm
in. I expected Poppy to have all this like knowledge and wisdom, but I feel like speaking to her directly, she feels so like wise and full of not just nature knowledge, but like I loved all the parallels she was giving to life and the things she's learned. I feel like if anyone should have kids, it's her. You know?
Yeah, she's someone who I've wanted to talk to for so long, and I do agree. I think she probably has so much life wisdom. And can you imagine being a part of her community garden and getting to garden with her and like learn from her? It must just be so nice.
I love experiencing your gardening fangirling.
Big fan, number one fan.
Yeah, it was nice to like reflect on, I guess, what things were like as a kid and school times. I know you asked her, what did she learn through gardening or nature that she couldn't or didn't learn at school? Have you got one?
Oh,
to put you on the spot.
Big question. I mean, I think it's like the resilience that gardening teaches you, because not everything's going to survive. Like things in the garden will die, and that's like part of nature, and that is okay. And you might plant something and it might not do that well, and that's fine. And then you can always just try again. And I think that's you can only learn that through doing something, I think.
I'm trying to think if I've got one. I'm like, I think maybe just connecting with nature has made me appreciate how nuanced things can be. Where I think at school, it's great you have to learn the basics and you're learning solid things, but maybe through nature things aren't black and white, and things don't have to be so huge and obvious. Like, if you're noticing the weather, or like I was going to say dancing with the wind, which I've done before. It doesn't have to be all these big things. It teaches you subtlety, which I like.
I think the magic is in the little things, like slowing down and noticing the details. Yeah. But thank you for joining us on Connect to Nature. We hope this episode has inspired you to get outside, try something new, and grow with nature this year.
Yeah, and do drop us a message. Let us know how you've connected to nature. On Instagram, it's Connect to Nature Pod. So thank you, and we'll see you next time.